Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska. This is your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. How are you this morning? It's hump day, middle of the week. Downhill slide to Firearms Friday from here. Working on JD Too Chilly for Firearms Friday this week from Reason Magazine. Hoping to have him on the program to talk a little bit about the combining of the ATF and the FBI. We'll have hopefully have some discussions on that. Tomorrow's program will be joined by Representative Sarah Vance from down here in Homer to talk about what's going on in the House in hour 2. Potentially another guest in hour 1, but if not, it'll just be you and me, sweetheart. Yeah, just you and me. That's right. Today's program, well, we've got, oh man, Senator Robb Myers is going to be joining us in hour 2, and he'll be coming on to talk with us about the state of the state, the fiscal state, the state of Alaska, and it's not great, folks. I'm just going to say it out loud. I'm going to say the quiet part out loud. It's not looking groovy. And I want it to change. And I don't want this to be doom and gloom. Somebody said the other day, it's like, man, it's like one beating after another. Every time I turn around, it's another. No, and look, I don't want it to be that way. Right? What I want is hope and change. I just want hope and change. I just want things to move in the right direction. That's all I'm asking. I mean, can I have one thing? I believe in this state. I believe in the people here. I've invested my life, my livelihood, my money, my treasure, my blood, sweat, and tears. I want this state to succeed. But there are people out there who are just addicted to OPM, other people's money, and they just see, a brighter future if only they could have all the money and spend it themselves, because they know better than you how to live your life and run your household and spend your money, most importantly. And that, my friends, is a painful process to watch. Especially, it just feels like it's a slow motion train wreck. Anyway, Robb Myers and I are going to have a discussion in hour 2 this morning about the private economy versus the public economy, status of the state budget, where things are going, what the spending looks like. It'll be, you should stick around in hour 2. In hour 1 here this morning, well, they're doing it. The PFD is dead. It's official. They've now taken the tact, the hard line in the sand. You're starting to see the headlines come out now. Yesterday, we talked about the 2 different articles, one of them from Scooter Kendall and the other one from Zach Fields, basically saying, I'm still trying to get over the fact that Zach Fields say that paying the dividend squandered billions of dollars because by implication, for those of you who didn't, I guess I will. I don't want to misquote anybody and be accused of being a bad person because I took something out of context or whatever's going on. But so I will make sure that I read the headline or read the comment exactly as it was written in the opinion piece in the ADN. So again, this is Representative Zach Fields talking about the PFDs. He's got this opinion piece that says the headline is "The reality we can't fund Alaska's needs and also pay large PFDs." But this was the sentence in the whole thing that just got me right in the gizzard. In the last 5 years, we have squandered $3.8 billion on PFDs. Squandered it by giving people their share of the revenue as resource owners. Now, you can go back and read all of what Hammond talked about, and Hammond and Hickel and everybody that was there creating not just the permanent fund, but the permanent fund dividend. The permanent fund dividend was meant to be a stop, a governor, a check on the unrestricted and runaway spending that Hammond and company saw in the legislature. And it was a way to give people skin in the game. And as resource owners, it was a way to pay them for what essentially had been the loss of their subsurface mineral rights. These were all things that were discussed. Hammond's written about this. It's in his book. He's got Diapering the Devil and a couple other places where he's written about the origins of the permanent fund. And that's what he talked about. That the PFD was the ultimate expression of capitalism because even though we had a socialistic constitution, meaning that it was communally owned, that the ultimate expression of capitalism was getting paid for that communal ownership. Because we lost our subsurface mineral rights, and as owners of the state, we should all so we got a share, a fraction of a fraction of the profits, essentially, from the selling of the oil. So a chunk of that, and he always envisioned it as he always talked about it being a pump. Instead of pumping oil, we were pumping money. That's why they created the permanent fund, because he could foresee a day when oil revenues would decline, which here we are. But he always saw it as a 50-50 split. He talks about that 50% should go to government and 50% should go to the people. Now it's all the government's money. It's all the government's money. And Zach Fields' comment, I know, I'm sorry, I should dismount from the dead horse, but at this point, every time I read it, my blood pressure shoots back up again, because how can somebody look you in the eye as an elected official and say, because we gave you, the private sector, the populace, the citizens, we gave you what is by rights and by definition and by a design, the framers of the the permanent fund and of the permanent fund dividend, all we're talking about, this is your money. They squandered it by allowing that money to slip through their fingers. And again, by implication, basically saying we could have done better with it. And in fact, he goes on and says, we've squandered $3.8 billion on PFDs. In the meantime, here's what we haven't done. And he goes on to talk about hydroelectric projects and modernization of the rail belt and adequately funding schools. I mean, although we are spending $1.2 something billion on schools, but it's still not adequately funded. What is adequate funding for 127,000 students? What is adequate funding? 2 billion, 3 billion, 5 billion? But this idea that somehow we squandered it. So they're starting to say, they're starting to, this is the opening salvo of the new attack. Then you have this new article from Bill Corbis, and I don't know if you remember who Bill Corbis is, but he was the commissioner of revenue under Frank Murkowski back in 2003. And his new article, his opinion piece in the Juneau Empire from yesterday, day before, it's time to eliminate the permanent fund dividend. That's the headline. I'm not making it up. It's time to eliminate the permanent fund dividend. He goes on to talk about how, the PFD has been a significant part of the budget, and to the point that paying the dividend has shortchanged other vital Alaska programs. Up until 2017, it was never a component of the budget. It was a simple pass-through. It was a simple transfer. It was never accounted as revenue. The only reason that it was accounted as revenue now is because up until that point, they'd been running multi-billion-dollar deficits, and they didn't have enough revenue to account for it, and they had drained the CBR, the Constitutional Budget Reserve, essentially one of the main savings accounts of the state. They had drained it of over $16 billion in unfettered spending over the previous 4 or 5 years, because they refused to rein in the insatiable, voracious appetite for spending that's going on in the state. And I got to say, this is a monster of our own making. We had opportunities. We put away a bunch of money in 07, 08, 09 when the economy was struggling, but oil prices were staggeringly high. Remember, it was upwards of $150 a barrel, and the state was printing money at that point. That's how we put a bunch of money away into the CBR to begin with. And we increased our spend and increased our spend and increased our spend. And it got to the point to where we were trying to live, this champagne lifestyle. And all of a sudden it comes crashing back down and we're back on a beer budget. And instead of doing the right thing, instead of pulling back on the spending to match what our income is, we proceeded for another 4 or 5 years to deficit spend. We've got a balanced budget amendment that we're supposed to balance the, but you should not be balancing the budget by drawing, half of the budget from savings. And that's what was happening. They were drawing $2 and $3 billion out of the Constitutional Budget Reserve every year. And every year I was saying this should be a warning. This can't continue. There's only so much money in there. And then in 2017, what happened? Governor Walker vetoed half the PFD because he wanted some of that money. And the worst part is that he vetoed half the PFD while paying lip service that it was going to be, that they was going to be used for state services. And then for 2 or 3 years, the money never left the earnings reserve account. That's the worst part of it. Not only did it get taken out of the economy, not only did they hold it back from Alaskans, then they held on to it. And now they're playing a bunch of other kinds of games with it. So I got sidetracked. It's time to eliminate the permanent fund. This article from Bill Corpus, we're going to get into that. And now Sean McGuire wrote an article last night, which has been updated this morning. The Alaska Permanent Fund has a 46% chance in the next decade of failing to fund the services and the PFDs. This is the opening salvo in the attack on the corpus of the fund. So not only is the PFD gone, the corpus itself is now under attack. Which I have been warning about since 1999. That was the first run at the permanent fund dividend. And I've said their whole goal is to not just have access to the earnings reserve account, but to the main body of the fund. That's what they want to have access to. All right. We're going to continue discussing this in just a moment. Trying to enhance my calm, man. I am I'm agitated. But we will continue here in just a moment. Again, Robb Myers is going to be joining us in hour 2. We'll continue in just a second. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Don't forget, you can come and join us on Facebook if you want. Facebook.com/Michael Duke Show/live. Come join us in the chat room. Back with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. Yeah, Rob says, in other words, there's a 46% chance that the draw rate is too high. We're drawing faster than we're earning. Well, not only that, but I mean, how many times have we transferred money out of the earnings reserve into the corpus of the fund? And are we double counting inflation proofing and everything else? All to justify rolling it all together so they can have access to the corpus of the fund? That's what it looks like to me. That's what it looked like to me. Good morning. Hello, Julie. Good to see you. You don't need to misquote to be called a bad person, just so you know. I know, but sometimes I'm just like trying to prevent it. Our money, not anymore, says Rick. Yeah, that's exactly it. School choice, backpack funding. Pete says, this didn't happen overnight. This has been in the work for decades. Ask me how I know, Pete. Like I said, I first started talking about the attack on the corpus of the fund in 1999 when I was guest. I wasn't even I was hosting. It wasn't even my own show. It was the Interior Alaska Roundtable, which was a show on KFAR. They called it the Grumpy Old Men because it was a bunch of old farts that would come in, pillars of the community, bunch of old farts that come in and they'd kibitz around a table and talk about the issues. And I said at the time that I was concerned about that. Now I was 20 years old, 22 years old at the time. Okay. Hello. This thing on? I mean, I could see it back then. And here we are, 26 years later. Shut down Juno, said Rick. Tim says, let's get on with it and drive the bus over the cliff. At this point, it's almost inevitable. I said it to somebody the other day. I said, if I was a gazillionaire and didn't have to live on the economy, at some point I'd just pop up a big bucket of popcorn, put my feet up and watch the whole thing unfold. But I live on the economy. I got to try and do my best to save it. I'm invested. Even more so now. I'm invested in what's going on. I can't just let it, but you're right. Sometimes you just let it burn and we'll try and pick up the pieces on the other side. Because, that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to crater this thing. They're going to drive this plane right into the tarmac at high speed. No glide path. The stall characteristics of a brick. All right? Please stop saying we, says Henry. It's not us. It's Soros, Obama, Gates, and the DNC. Henry, it is we. We, the people, are electing these knuckleheads. It's not just some mystical puppet master behind the scenes. We have become inculcated and we are embracing, not you and me specifically, but the people are embracing this dependency state. It's not some mythical person, one or two people that if you just pluck them off the face of the planet, that it would all stop. It is we. I'm going through here, see what's going on. Zach was set up here to do exactly what he is doing. Why are we letting him? We need to stop complaining on Facebook and start advertising in his district. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I would beat the hell out of him. If I was running in his district, I would beat the pee-wadding out of him with that comment. I would post it on every ad. I would quote it. I would put it in every radio commercial. Absolutely. Here we go.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
All right, welcome back. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Hiya. How you doing? Sorry, I get so agitated by this whole thing. All right, let's chat a little bit about this new piece here that has come out, and I'm going to try and pluck apart some of the things here that are discussed in this article. Again, Sean McGuire over at the ADN writing about this. It says the Alaska Permanent Fund has a serious risk of failing to fund state services and the permanent fund dividend in the next decade, according to projections from the nonpartisan Legislative Finance Division, which I have to chuckle because how nonpartisan is it, really? I mean, sometimes. The Permanent Fund Board has long urged lawmakers to convert the fund's two-account structure into an endowment model. Have long urged? Like the last 24 months. That was when they came out and talked about it. But long urged. I mean, I guess in a 40, 50-year life cycle, I guess 2 years is long urged, maybe. Sometimes the verbiage that these guys are using is just annual withdrawals on this new proposed endowment model. That's what they're calling it, the endowment model, where they take the two different sides of the fund, the corpus of the fund, which is untouchable, and the earnings reserve account, which is available by a simple majority draw of the legislature, and they combine them into one fund. And the withdrawal on that would be capped at 5% of the permanent fund's overall value, but that figure would be subject to debate. So, wait a minute. It's constitutionally protected now. You can't overdraw it, the corpus of the fund, because it's out of touch. It's out of reach. You can argue about the POMB draw amount, but you can't draw more than what's in the earnings reserve, right? Which has $9 billion in it. According to this article, the recent numbers. That was the first time I'd seen the most recent numbers. But you would cap a 5% of the permanent fund's overall value, but that could be subject to debate. So what you're saying is you're removing the protections from the golden goose that lays your golden egg every year that you live off of. Okay. It goes on to talk about how the legislature approved the POMV model, which established the current 5% draw limit on state statute, and allowed the permanent fund earnings to start contributing to the state budget. Yeah, that's when the wheels started to come off the bus. Since then, the permanent fund has provided the bulk of state revenues for services and the PFD, but the fund has been stressed. Now, one thing that they don't talk about in this article, which we have covered pretty exhaustively with Brad Keithley and others, is the fact that, let me summate this whole argument that this article makes. let me just break it down for you here. We'll still go through some pieces and parts of it, but let me give you the TLDR on this for you non-internet folks. That's too long, don't read. Let me give you the summation. Essentially, their argument is there's not enough money in the earnings reserve to fund state government consistently, that they're worried about downturns in the revenue stream. Every year, the earnings of the permanent fund itself, they spin off the earnings into the earnings reserve. So the fund makes money on its investments, and that excess money is spun off into the earnings reserve, which is tappable by the legislature. Their argument is, well, we're going to draw 5% of the fund's value, at the overall fund's value, and they're afraid that there won't be enough money in the earnings reserve to cover that 5% draw. That's the argument. Now, what they fail to talk about and what they fail to tell you, and what Sean McGuire doesn't even go back and look at the argument, is that this is a crisis of their own making. The legislature has transferred in just the last 5 years, 5 or 6, they have transferred over $8 billion from the earnings reserve into the corpus of the fund, locking it away. Now, arguably, some of that was for inflation proofing, but some of it was just because, well, we've got more money than we need here. Let's just put it in the corpus and cause it to. But see, then they come back and they say, oh, well, now we don't have enough money in the earnings reserve, so now we need to combine the funds to get this is intentional. They drew money out of the ERA now, and the ERA is replenished every year. Some years with with a goodly amount of money. Goodly, is that a word? And some years with a not so good amount of money, right? Depending on if it's a good or a bad investment year. But there's always money being deposited in there. But the insatiable appetite for spending in the state is such that they need to look, how do we get our hands on that $80 billion of the corpus of the fund, which heretofore we have not been able to touch because it's constitutionally protected. Will you do it by transferring $1 billion, $3 billion, $5 billion out of the earnings reserve, and so that all of a sudden you can go, gasp, we went to draw our 5% and there's not enough money in there. But now we need to take the permanent fund too, so we can put it off for a little bit. But you could see this has been building, and we've been talking about it. We've been talking about it on this show. I mean, I've been talking about it for 20 years, but this specific part, this setup for a single fund solution, has been going on for the last couple, 3-4 years. We were talking about, why are they transferring all this money? Why are they paying? They're paying. One of the arguments was, one of the tranches of money, which was, I think, the 2 or 3 billion tranche, was, oh, we're going to pre-inflation proof. And I'm like, okay, I guess I can see that. And then the next year they're like, oh, well, we need to inflation proof. Well, you just transferred billions of dollars in there that was supposedly for what is going on here? What is happening? And that's when it came to light that what they were doing was that they're shorting the fund, the earnings reserve account, and transferring that money into the corpus so that they could set up this whole thing, because that was what Bill Walker talked about, an endowment fund. They wanted to do this back in 2017. I'm sure probably somebody wanted to do it back in 1999 when they made the first run at the permanent fund dividend. Now, the only good news on this whole thing is that it has to go in front of a vote of a people, because it is a constitutional amendment. Now, the problem is that we are 25 years removed from the last time that this went in front of the people. And in those intervening 25 years, we have done a bang-up job of creating a welfare state here in the state of Alaska. a dependency state, where how many people are dependent on state spending? And I'm not just talking about welfare people, like people on welfare and food stamps. I'm talking about bigwigs, top 20 percenters, companies, corporations that are dependent on the government largesse and the government spend, that are dependent on government contracts and employees who are out there in the economy. They've built their whole business model around government spending, and they can't afford to see that go down. Because when we had this vote in 1999, and by the way, when they were making the decision on the POMV and the corpus of the fund and everything else in 1999, and they had the citizens vote on this, the pro side outspent the grassroots side by, I mean, it was, God, I think it was, I know that the Protect the PFD crowd only spent $300,000 in the entire state. And I want to say it was something like $5 or $6 million back in 1999 that was spent on the pro side, and they were defeated 82%, 82 to 18%, the Protect the PFD. They got the word out. But that's 25 years ago. That's 25 years. That's a whole generation of dependency spending and creation of all these programs and everything else. And I can already see the argument. This is where this headline came from. They won't be able to fund the services. This is the argument from Bill Corbis. We can't prepare, and we can't pay for things like education, law enforcement, transportation, and state government. This is what, again, Zach Fields was saying. This is the same thing that Scooter Kendall was saying. We can't afford to no. We can't afford it and pay for basic state services, which is a lie. They could if that was the priority. If there weren't a lot of other things that they want to spend money on, they could prioritize it, but they're not. They're, again, voracious, just unsatiable. The appetite for spending is just out of control. And if we give them access to the corpus of the fund, that is the beginning of the end. This article goes on to talk about some of the history of the fund, and it's really interesting. Now, again, Sean McGuire, he's a pretty good writer, and I mean, I enjoy everything he writes, but I don't know that anybody knows Sean, but if anybody knows Sean out there, can somebody ask him why he didn't look and at least mention in passing all of these transfers from the earnings reserve into the corpus of the fund over the last 5 or 6 years? Billions of dollars. With a B, billions of dollars. For them to then come around in the last couple of years and go, oh, look, the earnings reserve is a little short. I'm a little afraid that maybe we'll run out of money. Nobody said, well, yeah, but what about the $8 billion you just transferred? Well, it's, inflation perfect. I mean, if somebody knows, just ask him about that. Just dig a little bit deeper. He does make a mention, and I give him kudos for this. He goes back to talk a little bit about some of the history of it. And again, SB 26, the POMV model and everything else. And he does mention, it's a throwaway line, but it's interesting. Again, it points out prior to the enactment of the POMV law, SB 26, the state had been running a $3 billion deficit each year for several years. Yeah, no joke. We burned through $18 billion from various savings accounts in just a handful of years. But again, this is that opening shot. This is the shot heard around the world, folks. This is not just the death of the PFD, and it is. The PFD is dead. We'll be lucky to get it this year, maybe next year. But by 2028, no, it'll be gone. 2028, I don't foresee there being a permanent fund dividend. And if they get access to the corpus of the fund, Katie, bar the door. That will be a true problem. And then it won't be, do you want a PFD or do you want a tax? It's going to be, you won't have a PFD and they'll give you a tax on top of it, because that's coming. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's mentioning it in their articles. Yeah, I mean, Zach Fields, while most Alaskans recognize we'll have to generate new revenue at some point, that's taxes. That's what that is. That's taxes, for those of you who didn't know. And he's not the only one. Josephson said it. I mean, everybody's talking about it. Taxes are in the future, which we've been saying on this show and getting a lot of hate from you guys about, why are you talking about taxes? Because they were coming. And wouldn't you rather choose which one rather than have it forced down your throat? I don't want it, but we should at least have a discussion on it. But no, you guys want to sit around, la, 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 put my head in the sand. If I ignore it loud enough, no. If you ignore it loud enough, they'll just stuff it down your throat anyway. We got to have this discussion. All right, back with more.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Hashtag feels bad, man. Kim said, it's so sad. Half my kids have left, half the grandkids. Now watching our state implode after 49 years is so disheartening. Why does it feel like a Monday? Blood and treasure is well said, MD. And again, I don't want this to be disheartening. I want you to get mad. I want you to get out there and do something about it. I want, Kevin McCade said it earlier, somebody needs to be advertising in his district, in Zach Fields' district. Somebody needs to run against him. We need to get some of these jokers out of there to be able to make a difference. The challenge is when the constituents in those districts are happy with the way things are going. That's part of the problem. Let's see. Okay, I'm scrolling through. Please stop gloating about your self-fulfilling prophecy that they're going after the PFD. I'm not trying to gloat. I'm trying to point out that I've been saying this, and I wish somebody would listen, Henry. I wish somebody would listen. They've been giving reports to the legislature urging, okay, so thank you, Rob. I'm corrected on that. They've been giving the PFD, the PF board, the Permanent Fund Board, has been giving reports to the legislature urging that we join the funds for close to a decade now. Okay. Oh, Fat Ray. This is a good one. Looks like the corpus is now our money, comrade. It is our money. Yeah. Don't forget a $4 billion Scrivener's error. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that. when it was going to be, they was supposed $4 billion got transferred when it was only supposed to be $1 billion because it was a Scrivener's error and it wasn't. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We need to make 5% plus inflation to meet the draw. Over the last 3 years, that means we need over 9%. Actual earnings have just been over 3% a year in that time. So we're already 6% upside down, just right off the gate. I'm still scrolling through here. I thought everyone was pretty specific, said Kevin. I got dozens of emails last year saying, please don't tax me. I will give up my PFD. I got about 3 in support of the PFD. Then there are all those who have their own ideas, such as the Hammond bond or combining the two funds. So Kevin's saying that the vast majority of people were like, oh, it's fine. Just, take my PFD. Take the PFD. I'm happy with that. We'll just take the PFD. No, not surprising. We can't, it's not surprising. Why has the fund performed so poorly, says Jeffrey? How much has this incompetence cost us over the years? I mean, we were doing pretty good. And I don't know, again, I know when they brought in Ellie Rubenstein and she started monkeying around in there, that created some problems. They got rid of Angela Rodell up until that point under her command. The fund had risen to, whatever it was, $81 billion. I mean, there's Brad has said there needs to be some auditing of the permanent fund there. And Anthony's 100% right. State welfare is a self-inflicting wound paradox. In order to fund all our welfare programs, we need to pull more money out of the citizens' wallets, thus creating more people who need the welfare, which now needs more money. It's the doom loop. It's just another phase. It's just another version of the doom loop that we've been talking about. Right? Or maybe it's the same part of it. Because as you drive more people out of the state, it's a smaller pool of people to tax or to put upon for that. It's exactly the same thing. Yeah. By the way, maybe we should have just followed Norway, because Norway's sovereign wealth fund, which started about the same time the permanent fund did, is now over $2 trillion in wealth. I don't know. We'd be riding monorails to work if that was the case. I'm sure the state would have figured out a way to spend that $2 trillion. I'm sure it would have been. I'm sure they could have figured it out. All right. Well, here we go. Jumping back into it. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. I don't know if I even want to continue on this topic at this point. We're going to talk to Rob. Rob's only 10 minutes away. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Couple interesting facts. Representative Kevin McCabe's in the chat room, and he mentions a couple things. One, talking about the permanent fund and whether or not the citizenry is invested in protecting it. And he said, I thought everyone was pretty specific. Last year, he said, I got dozens of emails saying, please don't tax me. I will give up the PFD. He said, I got about 3 in support of the PFD. Then there are those who have their own ideas, such as the Hammond bond, like Randy, or combining the two funds. But he said he thought everybody was pretty specific. I mean, the PFD, I put this at the title of the video and the broadcast for today. The PFD is dead. It's just in its death spasms now. We're just waiting for the body to stop moving. The PFD is dead. I hope you get yours while the getting's good, because that's That's what's going on. Kevin also points out that we should be doing a little bit better than we are. And he points out that Norway's sovereign wealth fund, which is similar to the PFD and was started about the same time, is it 2 trillion? I thought it was 400 billion. He says it's $2 trillion, but I think the last I heard it was over 400 billion. But that's still 4 times what we have in ours. We're at 80 billion and they were at 400 billion, but it's a bunch of money. A bunch of money. So what is the answer? I mean, to all this, I mean, I could go back and pick this whole thing apart and this, it's time to eliminate the PFD. Bill Corpus is just saying what other people have saying. I mean, and he's propagating the same lies. Again, he's giving you that false dichotomy of having to pay taxes or to pay the dividend. However, when viewed from the context of an income tax or a statewide sales tax to pay the dividend, eliminating the dividend is a better. It's a false dichotomy. That's not how the dividend was set up initially. But they're presenting us with this false dichotomy of, do you want taxes or do you want the dividend? Inevitably, you're going to have both because you're never addressing the root cause of the problem. And the root cause of the problem is spending. It is a false, do you want income tax? Do you want a tax or do you want the dividend? Do you want to pay the dividend or do you want to have to pay taxes? They're going to take the dividend and then taxes will follow. I don't understand why this is so hard for people to see. I don't know if they're just in denial, if they just want to put off the pain, if they're just procrastinating it, knowing that it's coming. Don't you want to grab the bull by the horns and head it off at the pass and stop it from getting worse? And the other comment, the permanent fund was created to provide revenues to the state treasury when oil revenues decline, not to pay dividends. That's not what it... He's lying. Bill Corpus is misstating the actual facts. The permanent fund was created to provide revenues, but it was also modified to pay people their share of the oil wealth. I mean, Hammond was the legislature was very explicit on this when they created it and when they created the dividend. But a lie oft repeated, therefore, becomes the truth. And again, we could pull through this whole article about how they're saying the quiet part out loud now, where they want to combine the corpus and the earnings reserve. But just game this out for me. Can we take just a couple of minutes here to game this whole thing out? Let's just say, okay, we rolled over. We did what Bill Corpus wants. Bill, we all give up our PFD. It's all yours, baby. It's all yours. You go do it. You go do you. And the legislature rolls the earnings reserve into the corpus and the citizens sign off on it. Okay. Based on just the current rate of increase in state budgets and the spending that is being proposed right now. Remember, HB 69's price tag is $1 billion within the next 8 years. More beyond that, because it's got an automatic escalator built into it. That even prior to HB 69 being passed, the state government was already increasing $150 million a year just with all of its own baked in stuff. Then you got, defined benefits, and then whatever else that they want to spend on, including the new thing is the medication, the healthcare spend, right? But let's just take that $150 million a year baked in escalator and the $1 billion from HB 69. Right now, we're currently what are we, 500 million upside down with the dividend, with a small dividend. And if you took the whole dividend, I think we're just about 200 million upside down. So you add on over the course of years, and as it goes out, and even if you zeroed out the dividend, they're spending more than what the dividend costs. By the time you hit year 5, if they've taken all of the dividend, by the time you hit year 4 or 5, if I remember the chart right, you're back in the red. You're already back in the red in 3 to 4 years. All you've done is delay the inevitable for 3 to 4 years. You've taken a tremendous hit on the private economy, because that's where that money was being spent. That's where those things, that the dollars were turning over in the private economy. Yes, people were buying big screen TVs or trips to Hawaii, but people were also buying tires and clothes for their car, and they were replacing their boilers, and they were putting heating fuel and paying their utility bills and doing all this other stuff in the economy with that dividend money. It was a huge turn in the economy, in the private economy. Now that's all gone. And not only that, you're now taking more money out of the private economy because you've got some form of taxation, which means even less money to turn. It's a compounding issue. So you people in there who are like, well, just don't tax me. Go ahead and take the PFD. Just don't tax me. Bro, do you understand? Because you are not changing the underlying behavior of what's causing it. That's like giving an addict another baggie, right? Handing an alcoholic a jug of moonshine. Oh, just here, take this. Just don't do what, here, just take it. You're not changing the underlying behavior. Do you not understand that? Again, look at the 10-year projections. This is not rocket science. You can see it right there. I'm done talking about it. All right, I'm done. That's it. I'm going to go get a drink of water. Although, maybe, I don't know. Robb Myers is coming up next. State Senator's going to be joining us. This should be fun for him. In the mood that I'm in. Oh, baby. All right, we're going to continue. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Hour 2 dead ahead. Don't forget, join us on Facebook. Oh, and check out my Patreon. Patreon.com/Michael Duke Show. Whoa. I just watched this stuff and I'm thinking, wait, I just signed my life away for the next 15 years. And this is what they're doing to the economy that I'm trying to live in, that I'm trying to make something work in. Wait, wait, don't do that. I'm way behind on the comments here. Let me go over to, let's go over and check the audio and everything. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Oh, we're doing all right, Michael.
Can you hear me right?
Sounds like you're getting fired up. You're going to get me fired up.
I'm only here to set your hair on fire, my friend. That's all I'm here to do. No.
So what you're saying is I need my hair more like your hair.
Yes, exactly. You need to have less hair. If I had that beautiful head of hair, I would not complain. Just, I don't know what you're complaining about. All right. Well, you all ready to give us your thoughts? I'm sure you'll be cool and rational and everything else, whereas I'm kind of fired up and I'm just a little irritated at this point, right? So I guess here's
talk to you. I'm usually such a ray of sunshine.
Yes, you are such a ray of sunshine. But let me just ask you this, Rob, before we get back on the radio and it's just you and me and 78 of our closest friends on the internet. Am I wrong on any of the things that I've talked about? I mean, the statistics and the facts and the laying all that out. Am I wrong on any of that?
No, you're 100% right this morning so far. From what I've heard, it's
I do make mistakes. Yeah, I do make mistakes, but I mean, this is kind of right. This is kind of the layout of the land. This is how it's gone, and this is the direction that they're going. And I mean, we kind of called it all the way along. Why isn't somebody else paying attention to this?
Yeah, exactly. No, we're in serious trouble. And again, it goes back to one of my favorite lines, and part of the reason I wanted to talk to you this morning is because what we do around here is we focus on our bottom line, not on what happens outside of this building, outside of Juneau, in the private sector. We focus on that 20% of the economy that is state and local spending, and we ignore most of the rest of it, honestly, because hey, it doesn't affect our bottom line. Why do we have to care?
Right. Why what? Me care? Why should I care? That's not public economy stuff. That's not public. Who cares about the private sector? Right. I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to. Who cares about the private sector? That's a problem, man. That is a huge problem.
Massive
all right.
problem. Yeah. That's where we are.
I'm pulling this this little slide here for you down there. Whoops. You can I don't know, can you add that? Do you have the option to add that to the screen? Can you see it on the bottom bar there where you see the two of us in the green room? Do you see a third one?
I do not know. That's not me.
Okay. All right. So here's the slide. I'll add it when you're you just tell me when you're ready and I'll add it to the screen. So, but yeah, I mean, it's a little disheartening, Rob, because again, we've been talking about this for a long time. And we've got the same problem. We've got Republicans who are saying, take the PFD, just don't tax me, bro. But you don't understand. That's inevitable based on the current trajectory. And by giving them the PFD, you're acquiescing to taxes down the road. Instead of taking a stand and fighting now and stopping the problem, you're acquiescing. You're giving implicit consent to taxation down the road because you won't take a stand now.
You're making the cliff higher by the time you eventually fall off.
Exactly. That's actually, but that's I haven't put it that way in the past. I think I need to put it that way. That you are enabling them. You are enabling them by refusing to take a stand now. You are implicitly saying, "Give me taxes down the road," because you're not willing to take a stand on it. All right, I feel good about that. I feel real good about that stance. All right, Rob. So you want to hold on the line here, and I mean, you can hang out. I don't have to pull you back in the green room. Let me go back through some of the comments. Why does the PFD have to be dead and gone, Randy? You just go back and listen to the last hour, okay? I mean, I don't know why I have to explain this to you. Why not use the Hammond bond proposal? It only costs $10 million for the first. I'm so done with you. All right. Bill says, been mad for years. Throw hands in the air and for a sale sign in the yard. I mean, that's what happens. People just be like, I'm done with this. And they move. They just move. Yeah, and Fat Ray said, I don't think anyone disagrees with your assessment. I just can't see giving the bastards what they want is a good solution. And I agree. That's what I just said. By giving them what they want, which is the PFD, without taking a stand, you're essentially going, yes, give me taxes down the road, because you're not changing the underlying behavior. Opening the shipyards, as Trump said last night, and employing Americans would negate the Jones Act issue. We got to talk about the Jones Act today. We'll do that in the last segment today. I'm still scrolling here. They're saying, don't tax me, bro, because before they get to that point, most of these folks will move. That's true. They'll avoid the taxes right before they move out of state. Currently, the value of Norway's fund, Rob posted this here. I'm really behind. 1.74 trillion. Jesus, I'm 15 minutes behind on the comments. I'm never going to get through all these. Sorry, guys. We're just going to have to come back to that. All right. I'm from the MD show, and I'm here to help. That's what it is. All right, let's get back to it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, Free Thinking Radio. We'll be back with Robb Myers in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or translator around the state here. Thanks for coming in and joining us. It's just another beautiful day here in paradise. Thank you for being part of it. All right, let's take a crack at this. Let's get into this and take a look. Hour 2 now. Our guest on the program this morning is Senator Robb Myers from up there in North Pole, my old neck of the woods. He comes on board to talk with us today about the fiscal situation, the state of the state. I'm sure we'll talk about this attempt to combine the corpus and the earnings reserve. We're also going to talk about the Jones Act before the end of the show today as well. So let's welcome him to the program and get things ready to rock and roll. Good morning, my friend. How's life down in the bubble, the Juneau bubble? What's it like down there in the fishbowl? You feel like you're in a terrarium where only the rich people can look inside while you're clawing at the walls, or what?
I mean, a terrarium would imply that, lots of people come watch, and, because we're down here in Southeast and it's hard for most Alaskans to get here, most people aren't
right.
Watching, but,
it's just the rich people that can come in and tap on the glass and see what you're doing. That's what's going on, or the special interest. That's what's happening down there. Rob, we don't really have a plan as far as we're talking this morning, but, we have to talk about the fiscal situation. And you and I were talking during the break with the listeners in the chat room, and I kind of stumbled across a new way of looking at what we had just spent the last hour talking about. But essentially, all of you folks out there who are like, don't tax me, bro, just take my PFD. You're enabling taxes. That's exactly what because you were refusing to take a stand to protect the PFD. You're not changing the underlying behavior that's caused this crisis, which is the spending problem. And because you refuse to take a stand on it, you are basically acquiescing to taxation down the road. And I'm talking the immediate road. If we give them the PFD, Rob, I said that within 4 to 5 years we'll have taxes. I mean, do you think I'm off the path there? Is that probably a good time frame? If they take all the PFD in the next 24 months, what 48 months we'd be looking at taxation again based on the current projections?
So no, you're about right. So here's roughly what's going on. So I've been telling people for about 2 years now that the PFD is gone by about 2028. Give or take, depending on exactly how much extra we spend, depending on market performance, oil prices, things like that. And that's still about the direction we're heading. And most likely we end up with taxes within, I'd say, approximately 2 years after that. Again, kind of depending on, other things that happen there, but that's the direction we're heading. Here's part of our problem. We were talking a little bit in the break about, the permanent fund performance, so we can throw that up here in a minute. But, the first thing that I think people need to realize is, besides the federal funding, because let's not get into that mess. That's another story. But besides the federal funding, the two primary revenue streams we have for the state right now are oil and the permanent fund. Permanent fund is based on market earnings. And, what have we been dealing with the last few years? Well, high inflation. And that does two things to us. Number one, it raises our costs, obviously. And number two, the thing is that both of those revenue streams, the tendency when inflation goes up is both those revenue streams go down. And, inflation is better now than it was 3 years ago, let's say, but it's still not back where it was, 7, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. And, is it headed in the right direction? Yeah, but the rate of the drop in the rate has slowed. And so we're kind of going to hang out at this 3-something% level, looks like, for a while. And that's, like I said, higher than it used to be. And that's a problem here. So, we can throw that permanent fund slide up that I sent you. So this comes from a presentation that the Permanent Fund Corporation made to the Finance Committees about 2 weeks ago. And, over the 10-year, we're barely making what we need to, barely. But if you look at the 5-year, we're almost 1.5% short of where we need to make in order to make that 5% draw plus inflation. And at the 3%, we need to be making, over 9% over the last 3 years, 9% per year. And instead we made just a hair over 3%. We're 6% underwater already. And, that doesn't go away when you combine the funds. That just exacerbates the problem. All that does is it removes the floor. So you can't draw it down. It doesn't let you then draw it past that draw rate per year. But that draw rate by itself can and will slowly eat away at the value of the fund, and you just remove the floor to which you could fall. Now the floor is zero. Then there's the other side of it. There's oil prices. When we left here in May of last year at the end of the session, oil was sitting about $85 a barrel, give or take.
Right.
And as of yesterday, when I looked, we were about 71, 72. And the projection is that's going to continue to go down, partly because, we've heard President Trump say he wants to have more drilling, which means that there's more oil in the market. And then the other part is just saw a headline yesterday. OPEC and the Saudis in particular said that they're getting ready to open up the spigots. They've had 2 million barrels a day in surplus production they've been holding back for over a year now. And they're saying that they're ready to open some of that up. And again, more oil in the market. That's just going to drive the price down. Demand is not going up. It's staying about stagnant. So supply goes up, demand stays stagnant, we drop. And we're toast. Those oil prices are going to continue to drop. I've heard some people saying we're looking at $60 oil. I've heard a few people say 50. I don't know if I quite believe that, but I definitely believe $60 oil. So it's getting worse.
Well, and historically, this has always been part of our problem. I mean, I still remember the glaring one is Sean Parnell, 2012, 2013, when he wrote a budget and he based the budget on $115 a barrel oil. Well, at the time that they started the budget, that's about where it was. But before they got through the process of writing it and everything else, and before he submitted it, it had dropped to $85 a barrel. And so he'd already predicated the whole budget on, I mean, they were already, $30 upside down just in the price of oil. And that's the problem with the way that we do our budgeting based on these projections. We should be doing it on some kind of rolling average of what our average income is for the last 5 years, instead of picking a number and shooting for it and thinking or just go to zero-based budgeting, one of the two.
Yeah, no, that is, that would help. So the spring revenue forecast is supposed to come out here in 2 weeks, I think, ish. And, we'll see what that says. Most likely it's going to make the situation worse than what they said in the fall. An average would be better. The weird part is that where we're sitting right now, an average, let's say you did a 5-year average, you would be capturing 2 very interesting years. You'd capture 2022 when oil briefly climbed back over 100, and you'd capture 2020 where oil was briefly negative. So I haven't done the math to see exactly where that would end up. It might actually make the situation a little worse at the moment. But it's, this is what happens when you base your budget on a very volatile commodity, as we've done for the last 50-ish years.
And again, the problem here, the underlying problem is that we have an insatiable appetite to spend. I mean, that's essentially it. right? We are not. They're not even nobody's even talking about any kind of cutting back of government. I mean, you said it, I've said it, other people have said it, even people who are what we would consider to be fiscally conservative have said it. There's just no political will to cut the size and scope of government. So it's inexorable at this point. But because we're doing that, because we're just giving up on it, we're not changing the underlying behavior, which is causing the problem.
No, I 100% correct. The problem is that we spend, and this goes back to like I said, this is not a new problem. This is not a problem of anybody that's created by anybody that's here. This is something that goes back to the 70s, to even 1969 with that first lease sale on the slope. We spend the dollars as fast as they come in, and then when everything drops, then we try to scramble around and figure out how much of the spending we can salvage, whether it's pulling it out of savings or finding a new revenue source, or, in this case, the new revenue source is the permanent fund. And now we're saying, oh, okay, even the fund isn't good enough. So now we need a new revenue source. So it's, more oil taxes, or it's, some other tax. They got that corporate outside businesses tax that they're talking about, that's supposed to
For
bring
the
in
online, right? For
the
the
online business tax. Yeah, it's supposed to bring
yeah.
in 60 something million, whatever. And I'm looking at that and I'm saying, okay, all you're doing with that until you fix the underlying problem is you are just piling the cliff higher. If we're jumping off a fiscal cliff, you're pushing the cliff further out and higher, so that when we do inevitably fall off, because it is inevitable, then you're just falling down harder, falling down further. And that's what's going to be happening here. We have to get a spending cap in there. We have to start streamlining our spending. Whether that's Senator Kaufman's got a bill to help redo the Executive Budget Act to focus on measurable goals and objectives. Senator Hughes has the Sunset Commission that would basically tell the departments, you're going to have to justify your existence or you're going to sunset, on a rotating basis. And that, if we don't start doing things like that, and start examining, and ultimately, in my mind, one of our biggest problems is we don't examine what we're getting for our money. We focus so much on inputs, and we don't focus on outputs. And I mean, the education debate is the obvious example of that. But I keep trying to ask DOT, as another example. Okay, you build these projects because you say that it's supposed to help the economy, or it's supposed to increase safety, have fewer crashes in an area, something like that. And I keep trying to ask them, okay, how often do you go back and check that you actually met the goal that you thought you were going to meet? Did you actually increase economic activity? Did you actually, the
justification that you used for your project or for your scope or whatever, how often do you go back and check your work, essentially, to see if it gave you the outcome that you said it was going to give you?
Exactly. And I mean, it's like, okay, I don't expect him to go back and check something like, hey, we repaved this section of the highway because it was, it was all frost heaved out and, full of cracks. Okay, well, that's just keeping things in good repair. That's, kind of like the household equivalent of, replacing the light bulbs and throwing on a new coat of paint every now and then. But, the large projects where you're building something new, you should go back and check on that occasionally to make sure that your assumptions are accurate. And I can't get an answer as to whether or not they're even doing that.
Well, and it's exactly the same thing we're seeing in defined benefits. Well, if we do this, then we'll retain more employees. We'll have less leakage. But again, prove your work. I mean, the Reason Foundation the other day came up with those things that said these states have gold-plated defined benefits programs, and they're losing employees at a faster rate than you are. You talked about the education thing. There's an example of outcomes, and we see it time and time and time again. Oh, this will be a great program. Well, what's the outcome? Have we ever gone back and done any type of self-analysis, or are we just continuing ahead?
Yeah, no, 100% accurate. We don't talk about what we're getting for our money. We talk about how much are we spending? Are we spending enough? We don't say, are we spending it smart? We don't say, is this investment worth it on the ROI? And, that's a big part of the reason that we are where we are, because again, to go back to something you talked about earlier, and you and I've talked about a lot, because we have created a system since the 70s where a whole lot of people make their money off of the state. And so because the point is I make my money for the state, and so I vote for guys in the legislature or for governor who will make sure that I continue to get my money that supports my job, then that means that, I don't really care what the outcome is. What I care is the money from the state still coming to me? Is the inputs staying at a level that I'm happy with? And that turns around and that causes our problems down here. We focus on inputs. We don't focus on outputs. And and that makes the average person feel completely and totally disconnected from what happens down here. And they're 100% accurate, because that's not what we focus on.
If you want inputs and outputs in a nutshell, I have 3 words for you: Delta Barley Project. Right? Right? I mean,
that's fair.
I mean, that's just one example, but it is the most, we do this and it'll be pie in the sky and unicorns will frolic in fields of golden barley and it'll be fine and everybody will have jobs and it'll create a hub, and crickets, right? We invest all the money and what do we get for it? And we never do that self-analysis. We never look back. And again, the education thing's another thing. What is the outcome? Is it good? Is it bad? We never look at it. All right. We're going to continue here with Robb Myers in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. We got more coming up. The Michael Duke Show. We're going to talk about the Jones Act in the final segment of the hour, but we're going to continue on this discussion of public versus private economies. We'll have more about that here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
You want an even more a closer example is the bag grants and the broadband internet thing. Oh, we're going to do all this. What's the outcome? Is the outcome that, we've got another broken cable? We've got another cut cable. We had another option. We could do satellite. We could do Starlink. We could do all these other things. And instead, are we looking at outcomes, or are we just looking at how much money is going into it?
We had a cut cable in Juneau last week.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's the third cut cable in the last, 8-9 months? And the one on the North Slope?
Year and a half, but it's a lot in a short period of time.
Because the last one was last summer, right? It's been a year. That was the one that was the first time it got cut on the North Slope. And then it just got cut again here about 3 months ago. And they're still struggling to try and reconnect that. But it doesn't matter. 18 months, a year, 18, whatever. 3 major cable cuts knocking out huge swaths of the state. And in the case of Juneau, cutting out critical state services. And are we looking at, is this the best way to do it? I mean, are we looking at the actual outcomes? No. It's like we did our job by spending as much money as possible. Now we move on to the next one. We're not looking at, was that a logical use of our money? And you touch back on it, because I've hit on this, and I've taken some of the things that you and I have talked about in the past and kind of folded it into my narrative of, look back, 1969, that first big lease sale, that first royalty check, $900 million in change, when at the time the whole state budget was $162 million, something like that.
140 something at the state spend at that point. Yeah,
the state spend was 150 million. Call it 150 million. We won't split the baby, but they got over a $900, almost $1 billion check, and they burned through it like it was a house on fire. And it's insane. It's insane that we went from there to here. And then you ran the numbers and said, if we had continued on the arc of spending of where we were at that year, which is 150 million or roughly, that we'd be at somewhere with inflation and population growth, somewhere like 2.2 billion.
Last time we ran the numbers was in fall of 21, and it was 2.1 at that point. So by now, with the large inflation we've had the last couple of years, it might be something more like 2.3. I haven't had my staff rerun it in a while, but yeah, it would be less than half of what we're currently spending.
Let's say 2.5, right? We'll fudge it up. Say it's 2.5, and we're spending 5.3, something like that. Is that getting closer to 6 now? I mean, so I mean, we're way ahead of where we need to be, but we have to understand that historical context. And that's the thing that I think people forget. I mean, people like this Bill Corbus, talking about, well, the permanent fund was not built to give the PFD. Well, initially it was set to be the pump that pumped money, but then he modified it. Hammond and company modified it because they could see what was happening, and they wanted to have that. Oh, there was a great comment in here. Great comment from Kevin, who said the quote unquote militant ring of Alaskans that Hammond talked about was not supposed to protect the dividend. The threat of losing the dividend was supposed to trigger that militant ring to protect the permanent fund. So is it, or doesn't the militant ring care anymore? To which Frank had also a very prescient comment. The militant ring became state, federal, public, and corporation employees who are all dependent on the state. That's what happened to the militant. I mean, we've got something like no, we got like a 54% of the employees are working for one level of what he's laid out there.
Right.
Federal, public, state, city, corporate employees.
So I just double checked just for the operating budget. So this doesn't even count capital. What the governor sent over to us, and this also doesn't count the dividend, was $4.9 billion. So add in another couple $100 million for the capital budget, but that's our baseline spending, and that's going to go up with
right. So $5 billion is baseline, and then whatever else beyond, and we should be at 2.5. So we're basically spending double what we need to be spending, what we should be spending, and here's where we sit. All right, Robb Myers and I are going to continue this discussion. We are going to get into the Jones Act discussion later on. And we're going to continue. Please like and share, like and follow, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. Let's get more people involved.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
That guy is almost as mean as Robb Myers. I'm just saying. What? Robb Myers is who, me? What? Me worry? Senator Robb Myers joins us here this morning as we continue our discussions. Let's talk a little bit about the economy. We've talked about private economy, public economies. There's a lot of different things to talk about here. And I know we're facing a lot of new issues. One of the new things that's coming up is the Department of Agriculture, this new proposal to break out some stuff. And of course, we have to look at it in the context of spending and what's that going to cost us in the long run. And then we've got other debates like childcare debate and everything. So wrap this up for me in a pretty bow and give me your thoughts on the economy, private, public, new stuff, new departments. Is it the time? Give me your thoughts on this.
So I want to contrast a couple of pieces that we've recently had debates about down here, and how that affects the economy, and how even though the dollar figures are not that different, the difference in the debate down here based on those two. Okay, so last year, you remember all the talk about childcare, and that's still part of the discussion around here. It's not as much because we did pass a bill on it last year. Said bill is now being challenged, so they're trying to pass another bill to redo it, so it won't be challenged. Long story. And then at the beginning of the year, shortly before session, the governor put out an executive order that would create a Department of Agriculture. We are one of 2 states in this country that does not have a Department of Agriculture. And so he would do so. And mostly what he would be doing is taking the Division of Agriculture and moving it over outside of DNR into its own department. And there's talk about in the future, you move a couple of other pieces into that department. You take the state veterinarian out of I think it's Fish and Game, or no, it's DEC.
DEC,
yeah, out of DEC, and you move them over there. And maybe, some people have suggested you put the timber from DNR in there. Some people have suggested you take mariculture out of Fish and Game, you put it in there. There's good thoughts there. I don't have a problem with that. It's interesting to watch the difference in the debate, though, down here, because both of these are being sold as things that help the economy. And yet last year, bunch of people, especially on the left, jumped on the childcare thing. Whereas now we're talking about the agriculture stuff, which costs even less than the childcare, because the childcare was about 11 million a year. The Department of Ag right now is projected to add about 2.7 million to the budget. And we're trying to figure out if there's ways you can get around that. But the difference in the debate is astounding, because 11 million, let's go ahead and add that. We need that for the economy. 2.7 million, that's too much. We're broke. We can't afford it. Here's the difference that I see between those two things. The child care is money that is going out as subsidies to specific people, whether it's the folks that are having their kids watched for so that they can go to work, or whether it's the child care providers. It is something specific to individuals that is either a tax credit, or it is a direct payout coming from us here in the legislature, one way or another. The Department of Ag, on the other hand, is something that could help the economy, and I think it will help in the long run. But the difference is it's not a direct payout to anybody. And so you're not effectively creating a constituency. A lot of farmers are coming to us and saying, we want this, we need this. This is going to help us, because it puts us in the conversation at the same level as so many of these other departments. And it puts us in the same level of conversation with so many other states. So we can start working with other states, start working with the federal government, start figuring out a lot of these details that we haven't been able to figure out because they've been hamstrung by being a division underneath. The little extra money could help the economy in the long run. I think it probably will. But the problem is, since it doesn't create a constituency with its specific money going to specific people, it doesn't create the same reaction down here as it does with something like childcare, which does have specific monies and specific allocations going to specific people. So again, it's what happens down here is we are caring about, where does our money come from? How can we use our money to help us get votes in the next election? The Department of Ag doesn't help that for the most part, whereas the childcare does. And it's amazing the difference in the discussions down here.
It is it's interesting to see how it is. I mean, that's a blatant, like you said, creating a constituency. They can say, see what I did for you. Why don't you reelect me? Something that's the Division of Agriculture, whether I'm for it or against it, it's a little bit more amorphous than something that's a direct subsidy or a direct payment. And that's been part of the problem, is that we have groups of legislators who for years have been creating constituencies and saying, send me back, coach, I'll take care of you. We saw that in the last election cycle. I mean, a chicken in every pot, right? A moose in every oven. You get spending and you get spending and you get spending. Just vote for me and you get spending. Of course, they get down there and all of a sudden the tune has changed. Well, we're out of money. We're broke. We're all this other stuff. And so was it really, and this has been coming. This is not like we've been running deficits since 2012, 2013. This is not anything new. And the 10-year projections are even worse. So were they just not paying attention, or were they just playing to the crowd and playing to those constituencies?
Yeah. This is the thing, is that the way that we operate down here is our spending is, going back to what we just talked about last segment, it's not based on the outputs, it's based on the inputs, because those inputs go to specific constituencies who then vote to put people in office. That is the structure down here that we've created since the 1970s. And if we don't fix that structure, if we don't start to care about the economy in general, strictly because it is the economy, because it is private citizens trying to get jobs, trying to make a living in this rough state of ours, then we're just going to have more people leaving. We hit our maximum level of jobs in this state in 2012. And it's been trending down since then. It's gone up in the last couple of years, no question, between the major projects on the slope and, some federal infrastructure money coming in, things like that.
Well, after the crash of 2020 because of COVID, I mean,
right.
But it still hasn't reached the 2012 levels.
No, it has not, and we're not even close. I gotta go find the numbers again. But I had my staff take a look at that and go find them a couple of years ago, and we have been dropping significantly because, again, we focus so much of our economy in this state is based on either oil or on government spending, state, federal, local. You put those two together and you're talking over 50% of our state's economy.
Right.
And, this is the problem that we're in. So that lovely example of why things are heading the way that they're heading, because even though we've had, more jobs in the economy the last couple of years, the other piece that's come out is, huge numbers of those jobs are being taken by folks out of state. They're flying in, working temporarily, heading back out. So I was up on a haul road shortly before Christmas, and I was on my way back, and I stopped to help a guy out to charge his batteries because his alternator had died. Okay. So we're sitting there with the jumper cables on and just charging the battery. And he's sitting in my truck for 20 minutes or so, just staying warm, while we're waiting to get his batteries charged up to get him going again. And I start talking to him, and I looked at his truck, and it said he was based out of Montana. I said, "Oh, okay, you're from Montana. What are you doing up here all the way on the haul road?" And he said, "Well, I actually used to live here. I ran this road for 20 years. I left in 2020, and he and his wife still live in Montana, even though he's up here." He said, "I'm back right now because the money is too dang good to turn down, and trucking down in the States is in the toilet right now. But he's up here right now because the money is so good, but he's not moving back because he doesn't really see much of a future in our state right now. We have some good projects going right now that are going to last for a while. Pika is going to last another probably decade, honestly. Willow's supposed to go until about 2029. We've got federal infrastructure money that's leading to more construction with, bridges and roads and airport upgrades and broadband and electrical intertie upgrades, things like that. These are all good things, but these are all temporary construction projects. We know this.
Short term. Yeah, short term. Nothing long term, nothing that is sustainable.
Correct. And so, everybody that looks at this knows this because we know how this works. You come build a big project on the slope, and then once the project is done, you stop. And, some of the guys stay employed operating it afterwards, but it's a fraction of the guys it took to build it. And if we don't get ourselves a situation where we can have a long-term sustainable economy where people see hope and a reason to stay for 20, 30, 40 years or more, then, we're going to be in this same spot where, working class families are leaving the state, older folks are staying, as Brad likes to point out occasionally, richer folks are staying. But you'd actually be surprised at how many musicians and retired sports players and stuff like that have actually moved up here or put up second homes.
Right. Yeah.
Especially down in your area, down on the Kenai.
Right.
But unless we get to a spot where people see a future for the state where they can have a job and work for 20, 30, 40 years, people are going to keep leaving. We're going to keep shrinking. And, we talk all this time about state services, about, we have to provide things for people, from government, things like that. What's the point of services if you don't have the people you're supposed to be serving? If people are still leaving the state, what are we aiming for here? Does the government exist to serve the people, or do the people exist to serve the government? Who's the master, who's the servant here? Those are the kinds of questions that we have to really be asking ourselves.
And we've been talking about this. I mean, I call it the doom loop for a reason, because we've talked about this. If government services grow so large and the resources that are required to keep them going require you to tax the people in various ways, whether it's taking the PFD, whether it's eliminating the PFD and then forcing taxes or anything else, there will be a portion of people like your friend on the haul road who moves out. Now, they may come back and work, they may not, but it leaves a smaller pool of people to then have to shoulder that burden. And then in that next round, there are people on the fringes who can't take it anymore, and they leave because they're like, we can't do this anymore, we'll go somewhere else. And that shrinks the pool even more. And so it becomes this inward spiral where pretty soon you're taxing yourself just to pay for the services that are going on. I mean, it makes no sense. And
No,
that's part of the
100%.
problem with the disconnect between the private and the public economy. You need a private economy to drive the overall economics of the state. It cannot be focused on the public economy because it's a net consumer, not a producer. 1 minute here.
Correct. Yeah. And, and as you and I have talked, I think we talked about this last summer. We are getting close to a point where, we don't even necessarily need, much in the way of oil money. This is still, maybe a decade down the road, but you can see where we're going with this. We take the permanent fund money, we take the federal money, you institute an income tax in the state that taxes the state workers and the federal workers, and the few folks that are left to provide a service economy for those folks, and it becomes a massive self-licking ice cream cone. And that is what our economy is federal and state spending being recycled within our economy, but not really even producing much of anything.
And that is, of course, the danger in the long run as well. All right. Robb Myers is our guest. We're going to continue. We got more coming up. One of his pet peeves and mine is the Jones Act and how it's kind of handcuffed Alaska in many ways, and Hawaii and Puerto Rico. But mainly Alaska is what we're focusing on right now, especially in light of what's going on with LNG and everything else. So we're going to talk about the Jones Act here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show continues. Robb Myers is our guest. We return right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
All right, we're in the break right now with Robb Myers. Robb, I don't know, and maybe you can give us an update in talking, as you've talked with your colleagues and everything else. Is anybody else really, you and I have talked about it, Ben Carpenter and I talked about it, Mike Schauer and I have talked about it, but we really haven't had many conversations about this split between the public and the private economy with other legislators. They kind of give you a blank look sometimes when you talk to them about it, like, what do you mean? But it really is the root. It is really, well, I think it's one of the roots of our problems that we have here in the state, is that by focusing on only the public economy, we're missing out on what actually drives a state. We've been in recession for years. We were barely starting to come out of that recession when COVID hit. And so it's, been interrupted, and we're still here today. And is anybody down there really except for you, is anybody really talking about it down here, how we need to bolster the private economy, that's what drives the state?
There's some, we just had a press conference as a Senate Republican caucus on Monday, and Senator Kaufman brought that up as part of the reason why he's structuring his spending cap the way it is, because he's tying it to GDP, saying, look, guys, we have this disconnect between the public and private economy. Putting a spending cap in based on GDP is one way to reconnect. If the government wants to spend more, the first thing it has to do is make sure that the private economy is doing well to allow it to spend more, as one example. So there are a few folks down here. We've got a couple folks on the House side that are talking about it, but it's definitely a minority view down here. And that's, again, we're not talking about, somebody, something that's happened in the last decade. Things have been exacerbated in the last decade, but we're talking about 50-year habits that we're trying to break down here. And, some of us, like myself, want to break those habits, and others of us say, what, this isn't a problem. We just take the permanent fund and we keep spending, and life goes on the same way it has before. And, we spent the first segment talking about how that's not going to work.
Right. No. Because even that's a finite amount. Even if you take all of the permanent fund, and then down the road, a few months later, you have to include taxes, there's going to be a point, there's a break-even point, right? There's a no-go point where you can't tax anymore and you can't do anything else. The crash is inevitable at that point. And you're right. That's where we need to be looking at it. And you talked about it, and we haven't had a chance to discuss it, but you wrote this article for The Watchman, which is a fantastic article, by the way. because it really outlines the history of the state and how we came to here. We're not really a red state. We keep assuming we're a red state. We keep saying that because we voted for Trump or we voted for whoever, all these numbers. But the problem is that we're a dependency state. Give me the too long don't read on your article there. Give folks a synopsis here in the next 2 minutes on what your article essentially said. But I mean, it starts out with the premise of we're not a red state. Get over it.
I mean, that is accurate. We are a socially conservative state, and that's a lot of what drove the high vote for Trump in this state. Is we are a socially conservative state, but we are not a fiscally conservative state. We have really probably never been a fiscally conservative state, because as you and I have talked in the past, we were originally a Democrat majority state when we were admitted to the Union. And we didn't flip to Republican control really until the 90s. And at that point, the patterns were already set in. You take money off of the slope and you spend it, and those constituencies help you get reelected. And so when Republicans were, taking control of the legislature in the 90s, oil prices were, again, kind of in the tank and stayed that way for about a decade. And so it was relatively easy to say, I'm going to run on a platform of being socially conservative and keeping the spending under control, not where it needs to be, but under control, because the money coming in wasn't going up. So it was really easy to keep the spending under control because you didn't have any money to spend. But we saw that break in the mid 2000s as soon as oil prices started to skyrocket, even though the at least elected majorities in both bodies at that time were still nominally Republican. Our spending went through the roof. Even though we had Republican governors, our spending went through the roof because that was the pattern we were on that had been set by Democrats back in the 70s of spend all that oil money as fast as possible because that is your constituency. That helps you get reelected. And that is the economy in this state is where the oil money getting spent out through the government.
Right.
And until we break that problem, until we break that cycle, we're going to be in a world of hurt, and we are a purple state.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. And again, it goes back to what I said, unless we change the fundamental behavior that caused the problem, we're never going to solve it. And that's why we need to continue to focus on right-sizing and reducing the size and scope of government. I know it's not politically acceptable. I know it's not expedient. I know there's no political will. But the crash is inevitable if we don't. We're either going to be forced to it or we're going to have to do it ourselves. I would prefer to do it ourselves than being forced to it. Again, it's like grabbing the brake handle on the train and slowing it before it hits the edge of the bridge that's broken instead of just plummeting over.
The Michael Dukes Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Continuing now with Senator Robb Myers. If you have not gone out and read his article over on The Watchman, you should. We just got a brief synopsis from him on it. But essentially, and I want to talk about the Jones Act, but I do want to recap this real quick because we just talked about it. The article really points out that we are not a red state. We're a purple state. We're socially conservative, but we're not fiscally conservative and really never have been. And that's part of our problem. And again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, changing the underlying behavior that has caused this problem. Until we address that, Rob, it's never going to. So recap that real quick, and then we'll go on to the Jones Act.
Yeah. So, as you and I have talked about a few times over the past in different contexts, the pattern that we have in this state was set up in the 70s. Well, let's back up a little further, actually, than that. We were a majority Democrat state when we came into the Union in 1959. And we stayed that way until probably sometime in the 80s. The Republicans didn't take control of the legislature until the early 90s. I don't know when the voter registrations flipped. But, we set this pattern in the 70s when the oil started coming in off the slope of, okay, the pattern is take oil money from the slope, filter it through the government as it's coming in through royalties and severance taxes and the like. And then that government spending becomes a large portion of the economy in the state. And again, between oil and federal, state, and local spending, that's over 50% of the economy in this state. So, we set up that pattern a long time ago. And when Republicans took over the legislature in the 90s, that pattern didn't change. Now, it was easy to hide because oil prices were in the tank for over a decade. And so, our spending habits didn't change a whole lot because we didn't have any money to spend. So it was really easy for a Republican to run on a platform of, I'm going to be socially conservative and keep the spending under control. Because it's really easy to keep spending under control when you don't have any money to spend.
Right.
But we saw that pattern break in the mid 2000s once oil prices started to shoot through the roof. And then, the ACES oil tax structure, just exacerbated that. Even though we had majority Republican in both bodies of the legislature elected, with ours on their names, and we had Republican governors, the spending still went through the roof because now we had money to spend, which tells me we are not a fiscally conservative state, and we never really have been. Again, we're socially conservative, but we're not fiscally conservative. And until we break that 50-year pattern and the way of looking at the oil money and the state spending as our economy, then we're in a world of hurt.
Senator Robb Myers is our guest. I agree. And again, it's what we've been saying on this program for years. Until you get the spending under control, nothing else is going to matter in the long run. And the problem is we don't have people who have the testicular fortitude to actually stand up and do that. That's part of the problem. All right, let's talk about one of your and mine's pet peeves, and that is the Jones Act. This is an act that's nearly 100 years old. It was initially a protectionism act against, to protect American shipbuilding interests. That was back when America built a huge number of the world's shipping.
It's worse than that, Michael. It was aimed at Alaska.
It was aimed at Alaska?
So okay. So the Jones Act was passed in 1920, named so because it was sponsored by Senator Jones of Washington State.
Right.
And he sponsored that legislation because it's not just about shipbuilding. It's also about the ships being crewed and registered in the United States and owned in the United States, because he saw foreign shipping encroaching on the shipping of his friends in Seattle to Alaska. So he got that bill passed, and you're right. The ostensible theory behind it was to protect American shipbuilding, but it was aimed at Alaska. And now it's a lot of collateral damage in Hawaii and Puerto Rico and a couple other places too. But so here's our problem that we're running into. So we've got two competing projects talking about taking gas off the slope. One, you have all the talk about the gas line. And, I know that President Trump was talking about it in his State of the Union last night. And I would love to see that built. That would be the best thing to happen for Alaska to get our gas to market. But the other possibility, the other project that's out there is the KELAC project that Meade Treadwell is pushing. And what that is doing is it's copying actually a Russian project that would be able to ship gas 12 months a year off the slope in ice-breaking tankers. The tankers are already being built. They have already been built and been tested by the Russians for 7 years now, I believe. And so we know that this works. And so that would build an LNG plant up on the slope and ship the tankers out directly to Japan, Taiwan, somewhere in East Asia for most of it, most likely. And the problem is that because of the Jones Act, because those tankers are not built in the United States, they're built in South Korea, we would be prohibited from effectively importing our own gas. Now, we already know we're going to build an import facility. Hillcorp is working on one. NSTAR is working on one. One way or another, we're going to get an import facility, because even if the gas line is built, they've said it won't be completed until 2031, and we need more gas no later than 2028. So we have to build an import facility. There's a possibility that we're going to build an export facility. How do we connect the two? With the Jones Act in the way, we can't do that. So last week, I introduced a resolution requesting that Congress give us an exemption to the Jones Act for transporting LNG in state. I'm not even worried about exporting it. I'm just worried about transporting it in state for our own use until such time as the as Jones Act compliant tankers are built.
Right.
I don't know when that's going to be because we're not the only ones that have run into this problem. Here's the best part for you. So I talked about that Russian project,
Right.
that's shipping gas off of Russia's northern coast. They have actually shipped gas to Boston from that Russian project because there are not enough pipelines for lots of reasons I don't want to get into to bring natural gas to the New England area coming from where they're drilling it in Pennsylvania and stuff. If you and so they do not have enough pipelines bringing natural gas to New England. So New England imports natural gas. Now, most of the time they import it from the Caribbean, but at one point, a few years ago, they weren't getting enough gas out of the Caribbean. So they actually imported natural gas from Russia, from that Arctic project, because you can't import natural gas to Boston from New Orleans. It's
Right.
illegal
Or Texas.
according to Jones Act.
Yeah. Or Texas or anywhere from the Gulf Coast states. You can't move it. Your own gas, you can't get it across country because there's no pipeline, but you can't do it because we don't build. There's not a single U.S. built LNG tanker in the world. And
That is
now
correct.
we only account for like 4% of overall shipbuilding in the entire world now. Back in the day, it was like 40%. So it made sense in that regard. But we got this 100-year-old law aimed at Alaska, as you said, with all these other repercussions. And there's no reason why they couldn't write an exemption for this one thing. And if it could be for Alaska, it could be for any state that wants to import LNG up until a time that there is an American flag tanker built and flag tanker to be able to do it. It needs to happen. I know that Nick Begich has been in favor of it. Sounds like Sullivan is in favor of it. A resolution from the legislature, I mean, great. It doesn't really do much other than say that's what you want. But what kind of support are you getting on it?
So it's been an interesting conversation talking to folks because it brings in so many things. Some people are sold on we're going to get the gas line, so we don't need to focus on this. That's great. I'd love to be wrong. I'd love the gas line to happen, but those economics in large part are out of our hands. And so I'm looking at, we need a plan B. I understand that some folks that care about, the Jones Act are in general could potentially oppose that. I've heard kind of some rumblings about that. But I've also heard some folks going, yeah, we could, be in a situation where we're shipping out our own gas and we can't use it. And that's not good. We have to, we have to be addressing this situation.
Well, we'll follow up with this because I want to hear more about it. I know Washington State will push back on it, even though it's just exclusively for LNG. They see that as a slippery slope, but we'll see what goes on. Robb Myers, thank you so much, my friend. As always, it's good to talk with you.
Yep, good to see you, Michael. We'll talk to you later.
Sarah Vance will be joining us tomorrow, folks. We'll see you then. All right. I mean, Rob, this is the thing. I can't imagine even people who are supporting the idea of a pipeline. I mean, this is a no-brainer. Just support the resolution because this is, if nothing else, it's a short-term fix, right? It'd be a short-term fix to get it, to get it because we need gas by 2027, 2028. We need that gas. 2031 is, I mean, that's a optimistic timeline.
Let me throw out another reason for it, okay? So we're talking about, can we get gas to South Central? Because Anchorage and Wasilla and Kenai need it and stuff. Okay, that's fair. No question there. What about the villages? We've got a lot of villages out along the coast that are using very expensive diesel. And what this could potentially do is you're not going to ship, full LNG tankers out to a village because that's it. You don't have the demand to bring in a full ship, right? When you got just a few hundred people. But what you could do, which would be more expensive, but potentially still cheaper than diesel, is you could ship small containers of compressed natural gas or liquefied natural gas on barges to the villages or to the larger hubs like Nome and Kotzebue off of the slope and potentially start replacing diesel. I don't know that anybody has actually ever looked into that to examine the economics of it, but again, because of the Jones Act, it hasn't been a possibility anyway. So if we can get a Jones Act exemption, that is a possibility that somebody could actually look into, and it might actually start bringing fuel costs down in the villages.
Right. Because they've got containerized LNG now for trains and for other things. So there's no reason
But
why
not
you
actually
couldn't.
trains. It's actually illegal to put LNG on trains.
So on
Has to be
trucks.
on truck.
Sorry. On trucks.
Yeah,
So
got to be on truck.
It's a trailer load essentially, and you could put it in a Connex carrier or whatever and ship it to Bethel or Kotzebue or Nome, and then have it barged up to wherever it is.
So when you're going down the road, have you ever seen a what looks like the frame of a container, but inside of it is suspended a tank?
I have seen that. I know that. I recognize it as an LNG container. Yeah.
Well, so that's not necessarily specifically for LNG. You'd have to build some specifically for LNG, and they do exist, but we don't use them up here right now. That's called an ISO tanker. Usually when you see those driving down the highway in Alaska, they're carrying some sort of a chemical. It's headed to, Fort Knox. It's headed, up to the slope, something like that. So, I mean, they're common. They fit on a regular container chassis. They're it's built to the same 40-foot specs and everything. It all fits. But you can get LNG or CNG, compressed natural gas versions of that, and just put it on a barge and move it around on barges, just like you move containers on barges. And that's how we could potentially get natural gas out to some of these villages. Again, nobody, to the best of my knowledge, has ever examined the economic feasibility of it. But that's because up until now, it's been illegal anyway. So why bother examining the economics of an illegal project?
Well, here's hoping that we can get some movement on the Jones Act, because again, and I wasn't aware of the fact that the Jones Act was initially targeted towards Alaska in that regard. And it makes a lot of sense, especially where it was coming from, coming out of Seattle like that. And I think that's where you'll see the biggest pushback on your proposal, or a proposal to even offer an exemption, because even though you're specifically writing it for LNG, I think a lot of those shippers would see that as a slippery slope that, oh, well, if it's LNG, what's to stop it from being something else down the road? But I mean, it's something that's handcuffed a lot of people in this state for years. And it's been a huge problem for many things. I mean, the shortest railroad in the world, remember that in Canada, they had that little chunk of railroad that was like 180 feet. And that had to do with shipping fish, because they wanted to avoid the Jones Act. And so they had to, they take the fish out, they'd put it on a train car, it'd run 160 feet, and then they'd unload it from a train car and put it. I mean, it's crazy what goes on with that. They consider it an import instead of a coast to coast thing. But yeah, this whole thing is, its time has come and it needs to be addressed. And it's been exempted so many times, hurricanes, COVID, natural disasters. The president has written exemptions. I mean, there's got to be at least 8 or 9 times that I can think of that somebody has written a short-term waiver for the Jones Act. There's no reason why we couldn't do this in Alaska until somebody builds an LNG tanker that's American.
There's short-term waivers that are authorized by the executive branch. And you're right, those are generally like after hurricanes and things like that. There's also long-term waivers that are authorized by Congress. And there's been a dozen or so of those over the years. And if you want, I can send you a copy of a list of them. So, I mean, they have come out. It has happened. They are rare, but it has happened. And there's even been a couple of them that have affected Alaska. We got an exemption for running ships to help our oil industry once up on the slope for some of the offshore drilling that we were doing about 10-12 years ago, and another one for bringing a oil rig out of the Gulf of Mexico, or excuse me, Gulf of America now, up to Cook Inlet to drill, what was that, about 2006 or so. So we have gotten exemptions in the past to help us out. So we're going to ask for another one here.
Well, here's hoping that you can get some support. I mean, again, I can't see why anybody in Alaska would be against having a short-term or even a medium-term exemption for the Jones Act in that regard. I'd like to know anybody who stands against it. Quite honestly, I'd like to know what they have to say there. All right, Rob, final thoughts. Before I let you go.
Final thoughts are, we're so focused down here in Juneau on how do we keep up our spending. We are forgetting the fact that we have a private economy and folks that, 80% of the folks in Alaska that work are not working for government. And so we have to recognize that those are the jobs that we still have to preserve. And every buck that you take out of the private economy, whether it's through a straight tax or it's through the or it's through taking the dividend, either way, is a buck less in the private economy to support those jobs. So you want to talk about, well, what are we going to cut in our spending? Here's my question to that. Whose job do you want to cut to make sure that our spending can continue?
Right.
That is inevitably what we're looking at here. And if we're talking about the inevitability of taxes, well, we better start talking about, increasing the performance of our private economy, because otherwise there's not going to be anything to tax.
Right. Well, I'd love, send me that list of exemptions for the Jones Act. And then if you've got anything on Treadwell's, I hadn't heard about this project that Treadwell was talking about. So if you've got something on that, why don't you send it to me, and maybe I'll reach out to Meade and see if I can get him on the program to talk about it, because again, it's a solution. Maybe it's a short-term solution. Maybe it's a long-term solution. I don't know, one way or the other. We've got 17 trillion cubic feet of gas on the North Slope. It's a shame that we can't burn it here in the state. You know what I mean? It's a crying shame that we can't get that out of there. So, all right.
I'm all in favor of doing whatever the economics says makes the most sense.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Robb Myers, thank you, my friend. Appreciate you coming on board. Thanks for sharing with us, and keep up the good work. Maybe we can turn the state red from purple if only we can get a handle on our spending. I mean, that's the thing. We need to grow more fiscal conservatives in this state, which means we need more entrepreneurs, which is hard when they keep taking money out of the private economy. That malinvestment affects the entrepreneur. I mean, it's a problem, but maybe we can fix it, Rob. I don't know. I appreciate you coming on board. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, you bet, Michael. We'll talk again.
It's always good to be with you. Thank you so much. All right, folks. Thank you, Rob. We got more coming up tomorrow. We're going to continue then. Don't forget to subscribe to the show. You can like and follow the show page on Facebook. You can ring the bell. You hit subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube. On Rumble, you can do the same thing, right? On Rumble, what do? You hit the follow. You follow me on Rumble. But you can also share the show from wherever you're at. Wherever you're at, you can share the show. And let's get more people involved. Let's get more people talking about this. We need to do that. We've got to move the needle from this purple state status to, again, I mean, and I don't even care if it's purple as long as it's fiscally conservative. That's the thing. That's what's getting it. Thank you guys for coming on board. As always, I love having you, love talking with you. If you'd like to support the show, you can check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/Michael Duke Show. You can become a member, put a little coffee in my cup, help keep us going. You can go to michaeldukeshow.com and click on Join the Corps for that. All right, we're out of time. We got to go. We will see you guys tomorrow. Be kind, love one another, live well.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.